Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. The State of the Union address will address those state of affairs here in the United States. President Trump there on the stage, on the stand in that chamber a little bit later on tonight in our nation's capital. And it's curious to see what is said, but how long it takes for President Trump to get through us, because there are always conversations about standing ovations, different speeches, how he addresses the different guests in the crowd. We do have this here on Live Now from Fox. How long do you think the State of the Union address will last? Almost more than 85%, 86% of people believe that it's going to go well surpassed 90 minutes. Scan that QR code at the top right portion of your screen. You'll be able to see how long this lasts. All right, let's continue on here, though, on Live Now from Fox. Bring in to the conversation Reuters White House Correspondent Trevor Hunnicutt. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. President Trump, as everyone has said time and time again, the economy will be the main focus. How much does he stay on topic and focus on that tonight?
Sure, and that's what we're hearing from the president's aides, that the focus here tonight needs to be and will be on the economy. Of course, that's been the macro theme for this year, right? Is this idea that President Trump is going to focus on the economy? But of course, when he ultimately gets on stage, it's up to him, and we've seen him take the conversation a number of different directions, and focus on areas of interest to him. So we'll see how much he stays on script tonight.
Yeah, and obviously the economy is so very important. He's already basically on the campaign trail for 2026 in terms of the midterms. But how much will he lean into tariffs? Because it's not necessarily the most popular of subject. We saw the Supreme Court. The justices will also be in attendance tonight. How much does he wade into the waters of tariffs?
It's not necessarily the most popular thing with voters right now, but at the same time, you do get this sense that Trump wants to reframe that, right? There are certain issues where he says, oh, this is a 90-10 issue or 95-5 issue, and he doesn't want to change voters' minds. But this is really one where he feels like he has a winning argument, that this is going to bring jobs back to the United States, bring manufacturing back to the United States. So he's not letting that go, right? He's not just going to say, take his ball and go home because of the Supreme Court verdict. He is finding new ways to put this policy into practice, and he wants to sell it to voters as a real big win and something that no other president, Democratic or Republican, would ever do.
Yeah, with justices in the stand, everyone's going to be keying in on their exact reaction of when he does bring up the tariffs. But they're not the only guests this evening, because we know as the White House welcomed the U.S. men's hockey team, the gold medal winners from the Milan Cortina games. They are going to be in attendance for tonight with these gold medals around their neck for the first time since 1980. We also know that the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk, will be in attendance as President Trump's guest at the State of the Union. And we also know that victims, survivors of Epstein will be there. Democratic lawmakers, women will be wearing white in honor of that. And obviously Lauren Green there saying many Democratic women banded together to wear white for tonight's address to honor the victims along with white. Many of them are wearing pins that say release the files. How does President Trump weave through all of these topics, whether it be addressing Erica Kirk, what happened to her husband, the conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the U.S. men's national team? How does he weave through all of these guests and stay on topic a little bit?
I mean, it's a hard task. I don't know that anybody could do those two things at the same time. That's why it's going to be a long speech. It's a sort of laundry list thing where everybody in the White House competes to have their particular issue reflected, and it's very hard for the president and his team to say no. So everybody gets a line for their issue in the speech. I don't know that it necessarily will be the most elegant speech that we've ever heard or the most focused one, just because there is so much writing on this. This is a huge audience for the president. He doesn't get a lot of opportunities to talk to this many Americans at once.
And we're also going to be interested to see who hears this, who's tuning in, who's in the audience in terms of lawmakers, because right now at count, there's some 72 Democrats that won't be there. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying this is silence, defiance. How much of a movement will that be? How sparse may it look on the Democratic side?
Well, the Democrats have a few opportunities here to kind of send their own message to the American people, right? They're not, their party is not that popular with the American people right now, and they don't have a lot of opportunities to get their message out. So the visual is a big message for them, right? The speech by Spanberger is an opportunity for them. And so we will see something visual that will get some kind of message out from Democrats ahead of the midterms.
That is a good point. Their messaging will be key ahead of the midterm. How much of a point will this be in time that come November we may look back on the State of the Union, whether it goes either direction, say that might be the moment that the messaging from November or from this campaign cycle worked or didn't?
Well, as big of an audience as this is, we're still way far out from the election in terms of how voters think, right? So people aren't totally focused right now on the final choice that they have to make in the elections. There are places where you do have special elections and you have primaries that are moving, but by and large, for most Americans, if this is kind of a moment of curiosity for them, where they turn on the TVs and see, oh, what's the president talking about? But he still has time to shape this message. He still has time to review the feedback, and his team to review the feedback from this and see what they need to do going forward.
And you mentioned they're going to focus mainly domestically on the economy, but you have to keep your eye out. I know the world is watching if he says anything about Iran and what's going on in the Middle East. Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, saying that there are, quote, important negotiations Thursday. Iran desperately wants a deal, but Iran can't say the sacred phrase, we won't build nuclear weapons. Do you think he touches on the foreign policy component? Because also today, obviously, the anniversary of the Russian attack in Ukraine. How much does he wade into foreign policy, if at all, this evening?
Well, it's interesting because our own Reuters polling tells us that it's single digits, the number of people who want the president to talk about foreign policy tonight. However, he kind of has to, right, if we're on the cusp of war with Iran. And so having an open conversation about what's happening and why is something that you would have to think is very important, even though voters want the focus to be on the economy.
Yeah, that is a very good point. All right, my last question before I let you go, because we're asking our audience how long this speech will go, whether it be an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and maybe in terms of a reporter that covers this, how many pots of coffee do you put on? How long may long be tonight?
I would expect something in the kind of hour and a half range if I had to make a prediction.
All right, fair enough. I will appreciate it, and get your coffee ready, get that caffeine ready, because obviously an hour and a half, that's kind of the sweet spot our audience is also saying. Trevor, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Take care.